I'm Quinn, and I'm 28. My broken arm is throbbing as I sit in this hospital bed, but the pain in my chest is worse because my husband just told me I'm a drama queen, that I must have tripped down our stairs, that his precious mother would never hurt a fly, let alone push someone. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely alone in your own home. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. I should have known this moment would come. From the day I married David 3 years ago, his mother Rose made it crystal clear that I was the woman who stole her baby boy. Not his wife, not his partner, the thief. The first time I met Rose, she looked me up and down like I was something she'd scrape off her shoe. "So you're the one," she said, not even bothering to shake my hand. David laughed nervously and said she was just protective. Protective, right. At our engagement party, Rose cornered me in the kitchen. "David could have had anyone," she whispered, her smile never wavering. "I just want you to know that." When I told David later, he brushed it off. "She's just adjusting. Give her time." Time. 3 years of time, and Rose had only gotten worse. She'd comment on my cooking at family dinners. "David's always been used to home-cooked meals," she'd say, poking at the lasagna I'd spent hours making. "I suppose some women just aren't natural in the kitchen." David would pat my hand and change the subject. She'd critique my appearance. "That color washes you out, dear," she'd announce in front of everyone. David's always been attracted to women who take care of themselves. I'd smile and nod while something inside me died a little. But the worst part wasn't Rose's constant criticism. It was David's refusal to see it. Every time I tried to talk to him about his mother's behavior, he'd minimize it. "She doesn't mean anything by it," he'd say. "That's just how she is. She'll come around." Well, she came around all right. Straight to pushing me down the stairs. And now here I sit, arm in a cast, being told by my own husband that I'm imagining things, that I'm being dramatic, that his mother, who once told me at Christmas that I wasn't quite what she'd hoped for, would never do anything to hurt me. The nurse comes in to check my vitals, and I catch her sympathetic look. She heard our conversation. She knows something's wrong. But what can she do? What can anyone do when your own husband doesn't believe you? I stare at the ceiling and make myself a promise. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. Let me back up and tell you how we got here, because Rose's hatred didn't happen overnight. It was cultivated carefully, like a poisonous garden. The wedding planning was my first real taste of what life with Rose would be like. Every suggestion I made was met with a gentle but firm correction. "Oh dear. The Hartwell family has always preferred elegant simplicity," she'd say, when I showed her flower arrangements. Never mind that my last name was about to be Hartwell, too. She insisted on planning the rehearsal dinner herself. "It's tradition," she told David. "The groom's family handles it." What she didn't mention was that she'd invited 40 of her friends and none of mine. I spent the entire evening smiling and nodding while people I'd never met told me stories about David's childhood that somehow always ended with how close he and his mother were. The wedding day itself was beautiful, I'll give her that. But during the reception, Rose made sure to mention in her speech how she'd raised David to be discerning about the women in his life, and how she hoped he'd chosen well. The way she emphasized hoped made it clear she had her doubts. After the honeymoon, things got creative. Rose had a key to our house. "For emergencies," David said, "I'd come home to find my furniture rearranged. I was just tidying up while you were at work," she'd explain. "This layout is so much better for traffic flow." She'd go through our mail when she visited. "I was just organizing for you," she'd say, holding up bills and personal documents. "You really should be more careful with your financial information lying around. The food in our refrigerator would disappear." "Oh, that milk was about to go bad," she'd explain. "I threw it out to save you the trouble." Never mind that I'd bought it the day before. But David saw none of this. To him, his mother was just being helpful. "She means well," he'd say when I tried to explain how invasive she was being. "She's just trying to help us settle into married life." Settle. As if I was the one who needed to settle into my own home. The breaking point should have been last Christmas when Rose gave me a cookbook titled Basic Meals for Beginners, while giving David's cousin Sarah a beautiful pearl bracelet. But when I mentioned how humiliating it felt, David said I was being sensitive. "She's trying to help you improve," he said. "That's what mothers do. Improve." Because apparently, I needed improving. The worst part was how sweet she could be when David was around. She'd compliment my dress, ask about my day, even hug me goodbye. But the moment he left the room, the mask would drop. The little comments would start again. The passive-aggressive suggestions. The subtle ways of letting me know I wasn't good enough for her son. And I took it. For 3 years, I took every insult. Every slight, every cruel comment because I loved David and I thought eventually she'd accept me. I thought if I just tried harder, if I was just kinder, if I just proved myself worthy, she'd finally see me as family. What a fool I was. Rose announced she was coming to stay for a week on a Tuesday. Not asked. Announced. Mother needs to get some dental work done and her dentist is here in town, David explained over dinner. She'll stay in the guest room for a few days. A few days turned into a week when I asked for clarification. Well, you know how these dental procedures go, he said. She might need some recovery time. I should have known right then that something was different about this visit. Rose had stayed with us before, but never for more than a day or two, and never with so little notice. The night before she arrived, I did something I'd never done before. I installed security cameras, 3 of them, hidden discreetly around the house. Living room, kitchen, and the hallway near the stairs. Have you ever experienced that gut feeling that something terrible is about to happen? Share your story in the comments below. I told myself I was being paranoid, that Rose's constant criticism had finally gotten to me, and I was imagining threats that weren't there. But something deep inside me insisted that I needed protection. Evidence. Proof of something I couldn't quite name yet. David would have thought I was crazy if he'd known. Hell, I thought I was crazy. Who installs cameras to spy on their mother-in-law? What kind of wife does that? The kind who's been systematically broken down for 3 years, apparently. Rose arrived Thursday morning with 3 suitcases for her few days' stay. She air-kissed my cheek and immediately began her usual inspection of our house. The dust on these baseboards, she murmured, running her finger along the trim. You really should be more thorough, dear. David was already at work, so it was just the 2 of us. And that's when Rose's real personality came out to play. I hope you don't mind, but I rearranged the guest room, she said, not looking the least bit sorry. The feng shui was all wrong. No wonder David seemed so stressed lately. She'd moved my grandmother's antique dresser into the hallway and replaced it with the cheap nightstand from our spare bedroom. This piece doesn't really fit the room's aesthetic, she explained about the dresser that had been in my family for 4 generations. When David came home, she was the picture of sweet motherhood. Quinn's been such a wonderful hostess, she told him, patting my arm. We've been having the loveliest time getting to know each other better. The next morning was when the accident started. I came downstairs to make coffee and nearly slipped on a puddle of olive oil by the sink. Oh my, Rose said from the breakfast table. That bottle must have a leak. I noticed it yesterday but forgot to mention it. That afternoon, I tripped over the hallway rug that had somehow bunched up near the stairs. These old rugs are such a hazard, Rose observed. We should really think about replacing it before someone gets hurt. Saturday brought a wet spot on the bathroom floor right in front of the shower. I'm afraid I'm not as steady as I used to be, Rose apologized. I must have splashed some water when I got out. Each incident was perfectly reasonable on its own. Bottles leak, rugs bunch up, old people splash water. But taken together, they formed a pattern that made my stomach churn. Sunday morning, I caught Rose watching me walk down the hallway. Just watching, with an expression I'd never seen before. Not the usual disapproval or passive-aggressive sweetness. Something calculating. Something cold. That's when I knew my cameras weren't paranoia. They were survival. The accidents escalated Monday. I found a trail of baby powder leading from the bathroom to the top of the stairs. Oh, you caught me, Rose laughed when she saw me staring at it. I'm afraid I'm clumsier than usual this morning. Dental medication, makes me a bit unsteady. She helped me clean it up, chattering about how important it was to keep floors safe. We certainly don't want anyone taking a tumble, she said, her voice bright with false concern. But I'd seen the camera's footage from the night before on my phone app. I watched Rose carefully pour that powder, testing how slippery it made the hardwood, adjusting the amount until she was satisfied with the coverage. Tuesday brought strategically placed magazines near the stairs. I was just organizing, Rose explained when I asked about the stack of Better Homes and Gardens blocking the bottom step. David always said I was too neat for my own good. The magazines had been arranged to create a perfect trip hazard, just high enough to catch an ankle, just positioned right to send someone tumbling up the stairs. Wednesday's trap was the most elaborate yet. Rose had mopped the kitchen floor with something that made it impossibly slick, then placed a small throw rug over the worst spot. When I walked in that morning, the rug slid out from under me like I was on ice. Oh dear, Rose exclaimed, rushing to help me up. That floor cleaner must be stronger than I thought. Are you all right? I was fine, but only because I'd caught myself on the counter. The cameras would show Rose testing that floor, walking carefully around the edges while the center remained treacherously slippery. David noticed nothing. He left early for work each morning and came home after Rose had cleaned up whatever trap she'd set for me. When I mentioned the slippery surfaces and misplaced rugs, he just nodded absently. Thanks for being patient with her, he said Wednesday night. I know she can be a lot to handle when she's not feeling well. Not feeling well. If only he knew how calculated her illness really was. Thursday morning, Rose raised the stakes. I was carrying laundry upstairs when I heard her in the kitchen. talking on her phone. "Oh, I don't know how much longer I can watch this," she was saying. "The way she treats David, the way she maintains this house. Honestly, I'm not sure what he sees in her." She paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. No, he's a good boy. Too loyal to see what's right in front of him. But mark my words, this marriage won't last. A mother knows these things. I stood frozen on the stairs, laundry basket clutched against my chest. She was already planning our divorce in her head, already imagining David free from the terrible mistake of marrying. "Some women just aren't cut out to be wives," she continued. "Take this morning. I nearly slipped on her poorly mopped floor. The girl has no domestic sense whatsoever." The lie was so casual, so perfectly delivered, that I almost doubted my own memory. But I knew exactly what had happened that morning. I'd watched her create that hazard, then avoid it carefully while I nearly fell. That afternoon, Rose seemed almost giddy. She hummed while she cooked dinner, smiled when she talked to David, and even complimented my hair. But every few minutes, I caught her looking at me with those cold, calculating eyes. She was planning something big. I could feel it. Friday afternoon, Rose struck. I was coming down the stairs with a load of David's dry cleaning when I felt hands on my back. Not a push exactly, more like a firm guidance toward momentum I already had. But the result was the same. I tumbled down 8 steps, my arm taking the brunt of the impact against the banister. The snap was audible, sharp, final, unmistakable. "Oh my God! Quinn!" Rose's voice was pure panic as she rushed down to me. "What happened? Are you all right?" I lay there, arm bent at an impossible angle, trying to process what had just occurred. The pain was incredible, but the shock was worse. She'd actually done it. She'd actually pushed me. I think my arm is broken," I managed to say. Rose was immediately on her phone, calling 911, her voice shaking with what sounded like genuine concern. "Yes, we need an ambulance. My daughter-in-law fell down the stairs. Yes, she's conscious, but her arm, daughter-in-law." The word almost made me laugh through the pain. 3 years of making it clear I wasn't family, and now I was her daughter-in-law. By the time David arrived at the hospital, Rose had perfected her story. She'd been in the kitchen when she heard the crash. She'd found me at the bottom of the stairs. She had no idea what had happened. "Doctor, Quinn's been having some balance issues lately," she told the emergency room physician while I lay there getting x-rays. "I've been worried about her. She seems so stressed, so distracted." Balance issues. Stressed. Distracted. Each word was a nail in the coffin of my credibility. When David finally got to see me, his face was tight with worry. But not the kind of worry I expected. Not the worry of a husband whose wife had been hurt. Something else. Something that made my stomach clench. "What happened?" he asked quietly. I told him the truth. About the accidents all week. About Rose's increasingly dangerous traps. About feeling hands on my back as I fell. David's expression went from concern to something like disappointment. "Quinn, she's a 65-year-old woman with arthritis. You think she pushed you down the stairs?" "I know she pushed me. You were carrying dry cleaning. Your hands were full. You probably just lost your balance." "David, she's been setting traps all week. The oil on the kitchen floor, the powder on the stairs, the magazines." "Stop." His voice was firm. "Just stop. I know you and Mom have had your differences, but accusing her of trying to hurt you? That's too far." I stared at him. This man I'd loved enough to marry, and realized he would never believe me. Not about this. Not about anything that painted his precious mother in a bad light. "She did this to me," I said quietly. "Mom said you've been stressed lately. Maybe we should look into some counseling or, for me." "You think I need counseling?" "I think you need help dealing with whatever is making you paranoid enough to think my mother tried to kill you." Paranoid. There was the word I'd been dreading. The word that would explain away everything I'd experienced for 3 years. Quinn's just paranoid. Quinn's just dramatic. Quinn just can't handle the pressure of being a Hartwell. As they wheeled me to surgery to set my arm, I made myself a promise. Rose wanted a war? She'd get one. But she'd picked the wrong target this time. I had those cameras, and everything Rose had done was recorded. 1 week earlier, I'd made the decision that would save my sanity. David had just gotten off the phone with Rose about her upcoming visit, and something in his tone made my skin crawl. Not just the usual deference he showed his mother, but something almost conspiratorial. "She's really looking forward to staying with us," he'd said, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. "It'll be nice to have some family time." Family time. Like I wasn't family. That night, after David fell asleep, I lay awake thinking about the strange pattern of Rose's visits. How things in our house would be moved. How accidents seemed to happen more frequently when she was around. How I'd feel constantly off balance and clumsy during her stays. At 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went to my laptop. The security camera website was surprisingly easy to navigate. Small, discrete devices that could be hidden virtually anywhere. Motion activated, cloud storage, smartphone access. It was like they were designed for people in my exact situation. I ordered 3 cameras with overnight shipping. The next day, while David was at work, I installed them. One in the corner of the living room, disguised as a decorative bookend. One in the kitchen, tucked behind a ceramic canisters I never used. And one in the hallway, positioned to capture the entire staircase. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I was letting 3 years of passive-aggressive comments turn me into some paranoid housewife. But my hands were steady as I positioned each camera, and I felt calmer than I had in months. That evening, I tested the system on my phone. Perfect angles, clear picture quality, audio that picked up conversations from across the room. "What are you looking at?" David asked, finding me in the bedroom with my phone. "Just reading the news," I lied, quickly closing the app. "You know how addictive social media can be." He kissed my forehead. "Don't stay up too late scrolling." If only he knew what I'd really been scrolling through. Over the next few days, I reviewed the footage obsessively. Our normal evening routines, the mail carrier's delivery, David making coffee in the morning, nothing suspicious, nothing threatening. I almost convinced myself I'd wasted money on an elaborate delusion. Then Rose arrived and everything changed. The first day's footage was revealing enough. Rose systematically going through our house. Not just the guest room she'd be staying in, but everywhere. Opening drawers, checking closets, even reading mail on David's desk. The second day showed her testing the olive oil spill in the kitchen, pouring it carefully, walking around it, then positioning herself at the breakfast table with perfect sightlines to watch me nearly fall. By the time she pushed me down those stairs, I had a full week of evidence. Rose planning each trap, testing each hazard, watching each near miss with satisfaction. But the most damning footage wasn't of her sabotage. It was of her practicing her concerned mother-in-law routine, standing in our hallway, working on her facial expressions, testing different versions of "Oh my God, Quinn," until she found the right tone of shock and worry. She'd planned everything, every accident, every near miss, even my actual fall. And now I had proof. As I lay in that hospital bed with my arm in a cast, listening to David tell me I was paranoid, I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years of marriage. Power. Rose had underestimated me. She'd assumed I was the same broken-down woman she'd spent 3 years grinding into submission. She thought I'd simply accept whatever story she fed everyone and quietly disappear from David's life. She was wrong. I had her on camera, and she had no idea. The war was about to begin. The day after my fall, I spent locked in our bedroom like some kind of wounded animal. My arm was in a proper cast now, suspended in a sling that made even the simplest tasks impossible. Perfect timing, really, because I had something important to do that required only one functional hand and a working brain. I sat on our bed with my phone, methodically going through a week's worth of camera footage. Every trap Rose had set, every calculation she'd made, every moment of pure, calculated malice. The woman was thorough, I'll give her that. She'd tested each hazard multiple times, adjusting placement and timing like some deranged interior designer. When she poured that olive oil by the sink, she'd actually walked around it several times to make sure the slick spot was positioned exactly where I'd step when reaching for my morning coffee mug. And the powder at the top of the stairs? She'd spent 20 minutes getting the distribution just right. Not too much that it would be obvious, not too little that it wouldn't work. Just enough to send someone tumbling if they hit it at the wrong angle. But watching her practice her concerned mother-in-law routine was what really got to me. Standing in our hallway, perfecting her shocked expression, rehearsing different versions of "Oh my God, Quinn," like she was auditioning for a community theater production of How to Fake Grief. The woman had missed her calling. Hollywood could have used that kind of dedication to character development. I saved every incriminating video to my phone, backed them up to 3 different cloud services, and sent copies to my personal email account. Rose thought she was clever, but she'd forgotten one crucial detail. I worked in marketing. I understood the value of documentation. Meanwhile, downstairs, Rose was having the time of her life. "Oh, Quinn, darling," she called up the stairs around noon, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I made some soup, but I suppose you can't manage the stairs yet, can you? Poor thing." I could hear her moving around the kitchen, opening and closing cabinets with unnecessary force, making herself at home in a way that made my skin crawl. "David, sweetheart, your wife seems to be having a difficult time adjusting," she said when he called to check on me. I could hear his voice through the phone, asking how I was doing. "Oh, you know how it is. Some people handle adversity better than others. She's just delicate." Delicate, right. The woman who'd systematically terrorized me for a week was calling me delicate. Around 2 o'clock, she got bolder. "You know, Quinn," she called up again, I've been thinking about what happened yesterday. It's really quite concerning how accident-prone you've become. Maybe you should see someone about your balance issues. David's so worried about you. Balance issues. The same lie she told the hospital staff, now being woven into family lore. I mean, first all those little slips and trips this week, and now falling down the stairs? That's not normal for a healthy young woman. There might be something medically wrong. Something medically wrong. With me, of course. Not with the woman who'd been booby-trapping our house like she was setting up some twisted version of Home Alone. Of course, I suppose there are other explanations, she continued, her voice getting louder. Stress can do terrible things to a person. Make them clumsy, make them paranoid, make them imagine things that aren't really there. I lay there listening to her systematically destroy my credibility with an audience of no one, and I had to admire her commitment to the performance. Even when she thought I couldn't hear her, she was staying in character. But the real show started around 4 o'clock. Poor David, she said, apparently talking to herself as she puttered around downstairs. Working so hard to build a life with someone who can't even walk downstairs without injuring herself. And now she'll be even more useless than before. Useless. There it was. The word she'd been dancing around for 3 years. I mean, what kind of wife can't cook for her husband? Can't clean her own house? Can't even get dressed without help? That cast is going to be on for weeks. She was warming up now, her voice getting stronger, more confident. David deserves so much better than this. A woman who can actually take care of him. Someone who doesn't turn every family gathering into a medical emergency. Someone who doesn't make him choose between his wife and his mother. Someone who doesn't exist, I thought, but didn't say. Honestly, I don't know how much longer he can be expected to put up with this kind of behavior. First she's rude to me, then she's paranoid about imaginary accidents, now she's helpless as a baby. What's next? What's next, Rose, is justice. But you're going to have to wait for it. I spent the rest of the afternoon listening to her monologue about my failures as a wife, daughter-in-law, and human being. By the time David came home, she'd worked herself into quite a state of righteous indignation on his behalf. How is she? I heard him ask. Oh, you know, feeling sorry for herself. I tried to help, but she just wants to hide in that bedroom. I'm worried about her mental state, honestly. Mental state. Until another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. Maybe we should look into getting her some professional help, Rose continued. I mean, all these accidents and now these wild accusations about me trying to hurt her? That's not normal thinking, David. Professional help. Translation, let's get Quinn committed so she stops being inconvenient. I rolled over and closed my eyes, listening to my husband and his mother discuss my supposed psychological problems like I was a misbehaving pet. Tomorrow, Rose's relatives would arrive for their visit. Tomorrow, she'd try to humiliate me in front of an audience. But tomorrow, Rose was going to get the surprise of her lifetime. I had her on video, and she had no idea what was coming. David's family arrived Saturday morning like a parade of enablers. His brother Mark, sister-in-law Jennifer, and their 2 teenage kids. His cousin Tom and his wife Sarah. His Aunt Patricia, who'd never liked me but had the decency to hide it better than Rose did. I watched from our bedroom window as they unloaded luggage and gift bags. Everyone laughing and hugging like this was some joyful family reunion instead of what I suspected it really was. A carefully orchestrated intervention designed to make me disappear from David's life. Rose was in full hostess mode, directing traffic and making sure everyone felt welcome. Oh, Patricia, you look wonderful. Mark, you've lost weight. Jennifer, I love your hair. The woman could have won an Oscar for this performance. Where's Quinn? I heard Mark ask as they gathered in our living room. Resting, Rose said with just the right amount of concern. Poor thing took quite a tumble yesterday. Broke her arm. She's been having some balance issues lately. Balance issues. Already working that story into the family narrative. That's terrible, Jennifer said. Is she okay? Physically, she'll be fine, Rose replied, and I could practically hear the meaningful pause. But I'm concerned about her mentally. She's been under a lot of stress lately. Very anxious. Very unstable. Unstable. Another lovely addition to my growing psychiatric profile. I listened to them settle in downstairs, catching up on family news, discussing work and kids and vacation plans. Normal people having normal conversations while I sat upstairs like some kind of pariah, nursing both a broken arm and a broken marriage. Around 11, David appeared in our bedroom doorway. How are you feeling? He asked, though his tone suggested he was asking out of obligation rather than genuine concern. Like I was pushed down the stairs by your mother, I replied, which earned me the long-suffering sigh I'd come to know so well. Quinn, please, not today. Everyone's here to visit Mom, and I'd really prefer if we could just have a nice family lunch without any drama. Drama. Because defending yourself against assault is dramatic. Your family doesn't even like me, David. They never have. Why would you want me there? That's not true. They're just protective of Mom. And after what you accused her of yesterday, they're concerned. Concerned. Right. Concerned that their family matriarch had been caught red-handed trying to murder her daughter-in-law, or concerned that I might have the audacity to mention it again. They think you need help, David continued. Professional help. And honestly, after yesterday, I'm starting to think they might be right. Professional help. There it was again. The solution to the Rose problem. Institutionalize Quinn. So you want me to come downstairs, smile and nod while your family discusses my mental health issues, and pretend everything is fine? I want you to be part of this family instead of hiding in our bedroom like a sulky teenager. Sulky teenager. Apparently, that's what they called attempted murder victims in David's family. Fine, I said, getting up from the bed and adjusting my sling. I'll come down for lunch, but I'm not pretending anything. David looked relieved. Thank you. And Quinn, please just try to get along with everyone. For me, for him. Because after 3 years of emotional abuse and 1 attempted murder, the most important thing was making sure David didn't have to deal with any uncomfortable conversations. I followed him downstairs, where the family was gathered in our living room like a tribunal. Conversations stopped when I appeared, replaced by the kind of polite concern people reserve for cancer patients and stray animals. Quinn! Jennifer stood up to give me an awkward one-armed hug. Oh my goodness, look at your poor arm. How are you feeling? Like I've been better, I replied, which was probably the most honest thing anyone had said in that room all morning. Mom told us what happened, Mark said, his voice carefully neutral. That must have been terrifying. It was certainly educational, I said, catching Rose's eye across the room. She was watching me like a hawk, trying to gauge whether I planned to cause trouble. Don't worry, Rose. The trouble's coming, but not yet. Well, accidents happen, Aunt Patricia said with the kind of dismissive cheerfulness that suggested this topic should be closed immediately. The important thing is that you're going to be fine. Accidents happen. Right. And I'm sure they happen a lot more frequently around certain people. We moved to the dining room for lunch, where Rose had prepared a spread that would have impressed a magazine photographer. Roast beef, homemade rolls, 3 different side dishes, and a dessert that looked like it belonged in a bakery window. Rose, this is incredible, Sarah gushed. You've outdone yourself. Oh, it's nothing, Rose said modestly. I just enjoy taking care of family. Taking care of family. Unless that family member happens to be married to your son, in which case you try to push them down the stairs. I took my seat at the table and prepared for what I suspected would be the longest meal of my life. Everyone was being overly polite, the kind of politeness that signals underlying tension. They kept glancing at me like I might explode at any moment, then looking away quickly when they caught my eye. Rose, meanwhile, was the picture of gracious hostess, making sure everyone's glasses were full, asking about their lives, sharing funny stories about David's childhood. She was charming, engaging, and utterly convincing in her role as the loving mother and grandmother. No wonder David couldn't see through her act. She was that good. But I knew what was coming. Rose wasn't done with me yet. She'd set this stage carefully, gathered her audience, and prepared her final performance. All she needed was the right moment to deliver her closing monologue. I sat there quietly, cutting my roast beef one-handed and waiting for the show to begin. The performance started during dessert. You know, Rose said, setting down a piece of her homemade apple pie that probably took hours to make. It's been such a challenging week. Poor Quinn has been having such a difficult time. Here we go, I thought, taking another bite of pie and waiting for the other shoe to drop. I mean, first there were all those little accidents around the house, Rose continued, her voice filled with what sounded like genuine concern. Slipping on wet floors, tripping over rugs. I kept telling David I was worried about her coordination. The family murmured sympathetically, shooting me those pitying looks people reserve for the mentally unstable and chronically clumsy. And now this terrible fall down the stairs, Rose said, shaking her head sadly. Thank goodness it was just a broken arm. It could have been so much worse. Poor thing, Jennifer said, reaching over to pat my good hand. You must be in so much pain. I'm managing, I replied, which was true in more ways than one. The doctor said she'll need to take it easy for several weeks, Rose continued. No lifting, no cleaning, very limited mobility. I offered to stay longer to help, but she trailed off with a delicate shrug. But what, Rose? Don't stop now when you're just getting to the good part. Well, I don't think my help is particularly welcome, she finished, looking around the table with the wounded expression of a woman who'd been unfairly rejected. That's ridiculous, Mark said immediately. Mom, you're just trying to help. Quinn, surely you can see that. All eyes turned to me, waiting for my response. This was it. The moment Rose had been building toward. The intervention disguised as a family lunch. "I'm sure Rose means well," I said carefully, watching her face for any sign of satisfaction. "But I think we'll manage fine on our own. Will you, though?" Rose asked, and there was just a hint of steel beneath the sugar in her voice. "I mean, David works such long hours, and now with your injury—" She let the sentence hang there, unfinished but clear in its implication. "How will you possibly cope, you useless woman?" "I'm not helpless," I said quietly. "Of course not," Rose said quickly. "I didn't mean to suggest that. It's just that you've seemed so overwhelmed lately. So stressed, even before the accident. Stressed, overwhelmed. More pieces of my supposed psychological profile being shared with the jury. Sometimes I wonder if the pressure of marriage isn't just too much for some people," Rose continued, her voice growing more confident as she warmed to her theme. "Not everyone is cut out for the responsibilities that come with being a wife. The responsibilities. Like submitting to psychological warfare from your mother-in-law, apparently." "Mom," David said quietly, but there was no real warning in his voice. More like a gentle suggestion that she was being slightly indiscreet. "I'm just saying," Rose pressed on, "that some women thrive in domestic life, and others—" Another delicate shrug. "Well, others struggle with even the basics. The basics. Like walking downstairs without being pushed." "Quinn does fine," David said, but his defense was half-hearted at best. "Does she?" Rose asked, her voice taking on that tone of innocent inquiry that I'd learned to dread. "I mean, look around this house, David. Really look. When was the last time it was properly cleaned? When was the last time you came home to a cooked meal?" I felt the family's attention shift, their eyes scanning our dining room for signs of domestic failure. Rose had them exactly where she wanted them. And now, with this injury, she can't even take care of basic household tasks. She can't cook, can't clean, can't do laundry. What exactly can she contribute? What exactly can she contribute? Can she— The question hung in the air like poisonous gas. "That's enough," David said. But again, his protest was weak, pro forma. "I'm not trying to be cruel," Rose said, her voice full of false compassion. "I'm just worried about my son. David deserves a partner who can actually be a partner. Someone who can share the load instead of adding to it. Someone who can share the load." Translation: someone who will submit to Rose's authority without question. "Someone stable," she continued, really hitting her stride now. "Someone reliable. Someone who doesn't turn family gatherings into medical emergencies with wild accusations and dramatic scenes. Wild accusations, dramatic scenes. The greatest hits of my supposed character flaws, all compiled into one devastating performance review. I sat there listening to Rose systematically destroy my reputation in front of David's entire family, and I had to admit, she was impressive. Every word was calculated, every pause perfectly timed. She was painting me as the unstable, incompetent, burdensome wife who was dragging poor David down with my inability to function like a normal human being. And the worst part of me was starting to believe her. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe I was unstable. Maybe I had imagined the malice in her eyes, the calculation in her movements. Maybe I really was just a clumsy, incompetent woman who couldn't handle the basic responsibilities of adult life. Maybe Rose was right about everything. But then I remembered the videos on my phone, and something cold and hard settled in my chest. Without saying a word, I stood up from the table and walked to the living room, where my phone was charging on the side table. The family watched me go, probably assuming I was fleeing in tears like Rose expected me to. Instead, I picked up my phone, walked back to the dining room, and connected it to our smart TV. "Quinn," David said, his voice warning me not to do whatever I was about to do. "What are you doing?" Rose asked, but I could hear the first note of uncertainty in her voice. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the camera app and selected the first video. Rose, standing in our kitchen at 6 a.m, carefully pouring olive oil on the floor, testing how slippery it was, positioning the puddle exactly where she wanted it. The room went completely silent. I played the next video. Rose arranging magazines at the bottom of the stairs, creating the perfect tripping hazard. Standing back to admire her work like an artist viewing a finished painting. Then another. Rose spreading baby powder on the hardwood floor, walking carefully around the edges to test how treacherous she'd made it. And another. Rose practicing her shocked expression in our hallway mirror, rehearsing different versions of "Oh my God, Quinn," until she found the right balance of surprise and concern. And finally, the money shot. Rose's hands on my back as I carried David's dry cleaning down the stairs. The push was subtle but unmistakable, captured in perfect high-definition video. When the last video ended, I looked around the table at David's family. Their faces were white with shock, their mouths hanging open like they'd just witnessed a car accident. Rose herself was gray as ash, her carefully constructed facade crumbling in real time. "Well," I said into the stunned silence, my voice perfectly calm, "I guess that settles the question of whether I'm paranoid or not." The silence after the videos ended was so complete you could have heard a pin drop in the next county. Rose sat frozen in her chair, staring at the black TV screen like she could will the evidence to disappear. Her face had gone from gray to green, and for a moment I thought she might actually faint. The rest of the family looked like they'd been hit by lightning. Mark's mouth was hanging open. Jennifer had her hand pressed to her chest. Aunt Patricia was gripping her water glass so hard I was surprised it didn't shatter. And David? David looked like a man watching his entire worldview collapse in real time. That's not... Rose finally found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. I would never... Really? I asked, keeping my tone conversational. Because it certainly looked like you were setting traps for me all week. And that last video? That definitely looked like you pushing me down the stairs. It's not what it looks like, Rose said desperately, turning to face the family. You have to understand, I was trying to... She couldn't finish the sentence because there was no way to finish it. No explanation that could make sense of what they'd all just witnessed. You were trying to what? Mark asked, his voice hollow with shock. Mom, what the hell was that? I wasn't trying to hurt her, Rose said, tears beginning to stream down her face. I needed her to see... To see what? David finally spoke, his voice barely audible. That she wasn't right for you, Rose burst out, abandoning all pretense. That she was weak and incompetent and would never make you happy. I was trying to show you what kind of wife she really was. The confession hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Rose had just admitted, in front of 6 witnesses, that she'd systematically tortured me for a week and then tried to send me tumbling down a flight of stairs to prove some twisted point about my worthiness as David's wife. Mom, Jennifer said, her voice filled with horror, you could have killed her. I wasn't trying to kill anyone, Rose protested. I just wanted her to get hurt enough that David would see how fragile and useless she was, how she'd never be able to take care of him properly. Even in her confession, Rose couldn't help but continue insulting me. The woman was pathologically unable to see me as anything other than an obstacle to be removed from David's life. Get out, Tom said suddenly, his voice shaking with rage. Just get out! Get out of here right now! Rose looked around the table desperately, searching for support, for someone who might understand her logic. But she found only horror, disgust, and shame. David, she pleaded, reaching for her son's hand. David, you have to understand. I was doing this for you. She was never going to make you happy. A mother knows these things. David pulled his hand away from hers like she'd burned him. Get out, he said quietly. For a moment, I thought Rose might actually leave with some dignity intact. She stood up from her chair, gathered her purse, and walked toward the front door like a woman accepting defeat. But Rose had never been one to go quietly. At the doorway, she turned around and delivered one final devastating performance. Fine, she said, her voice rising to a near shriek. Fine, but don't come crying to me when you realize what kind of woman you married. Don't come crying to me when she turns out to be everything I said she was, when she makes your life miserable, when she destroys this family. She was pointing at me now, her face twisted with pure hatred. You think you've won something here? You think you're so clever with your little cameras and your little videos? You're nothing. Nothing. You're a manipulative little snake who's turned my son against his own mother. The mask was completely off now. This was the real Rose, the woman I'd been living with for 3 years. Ugly, vicious, and completely unhinged. And you, she turned on David, her voice breaking. You're choosing her over your own flesh and blood? The woman who raised you? Who sacrificed everything for you? You're going to believe some edited videos over your own mother? Mom, stop, David said, but Rose was beyond stopping. This family is ruined, she screamed. Ruined! And it's all because of her. That manipulative little witch who wormed her way into our lives and destroyed everything good we had. She stood there shaking with rage for another moment, then turned and stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. The silence that followed was somehow even more profound than before. Finally, David spoke. Quinn, he said, and I could hear his voice breaking. I don't know what to say. I looked at him sitting there, this man I'd loved enough to marry, and waited for the apology. The acknowledgement that I'd been telling the truth all along, the recognition that his mother had tried to seriously injure me, and I'd been brave enough to gather the evidence that exposed her. Instead, David stood up and faced me with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, hard, furious. How long? He asked. How long what? How long have you been spying on my mother? How long have you been planning this ambush? I stared at him in disbelief. David, she tried to kill me. She tried to prove a point. A stupid, dangerous point, but you set up cameras in our house. You recorded my mother without her consent. You planned this whole humiliation. I protected myself from attempted murder. You manipulated this entire situation. David's voice was rising now, matching his mother's earlier hysteria. You could have come to me. You could have shown me the videos privately. Instead, you chose to humiliate my mother in front of the entire family. I looked around the table at David's relatives, expecting someone to speak up, to point out the insanity of what he was saying. But they were all staring at their plates, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. Your mother spent a week trying to seriously injure me, I said slowly. And you're angry that I exposed her publicly? I'm angry that my wife is apparently capable of this level of manipulation and deception. Manipulation, deception. The same words Rose had used to describe me. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out of my house. Right now. David stared at me like I'd slapped him. This is my house too. Not anymore, it's not. Get out, David. Get out and don't come back. You can't be serious. Try me. David, stop. Jennifer's voice cut through his tirade. Just stop. We all saw the videos. Are you seriously defending this after what we just watched? Mark added, his voice thick with disgust. Your mother tried to hurt her, Tom said, standing up from his chair. And you're attacking Quinn for exposing it? But David wasn't listening. He was too far gone, too committed to his narrative. You're all being manipulated, he said desperately. Can't you see that? She planned this whole thing. No, David, came a voice from the corner. Emma, Mark, and Jennifer's 17-year-old daughter, who'd been quiet throughout the meal. The only thing she planned was protecting herself from your psycho mother. Emma, Jennifer warned. No, Mom, this is insane. Grandma Rose literally tried to murder Quinn, and Uncle David is mad at Quinn for having proof? That's messed up. Out of the mouths of babes. I looked at David standing there, his family turning against him one by one, and I saw the moment he made his choice. It was the same choice he'd been making for 3 years. The same choice he'd just made when he attacked me instead of defending me. He chose his mother. Fine, he said, grabbing his keys from the counter. But this isn't over, Quinn. We're going to talk about this when you calm down. When I calm down. Because of course this was all about my emotional instability. There's nothing to talk about, I said. I want a divorce. And I want both of you out of my house. Now. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Both of us? David asked. You and your mother. I want you both gone. Tonight. Quinn, you can't just… Emma, I said, turning to the teenager who'd been the only one brave enough to call this situation what it was. Would you mind helping me pack some bags? I think your uncle and his mother have overstayed their welcome. Emma stood up immediately. Absolutely. Emma, sit down, Mark started, but Jennifer put a hand on his arm. No, Jennifer said quietly. Let her help. This is the right thing to do. As Emma and I headed toward the stairs to pack Rose's things from the guest room, I heard David behind us, still protesting, still making excuses. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was finally, truly free. David came back 2 hours later, of course. I was expecting him. What I wasn't expecting was for him to actually respect my demand that he leave. But when I heard his car in the driveway, I looked out the window to see him getting out slowly, staring at the 2 suitcases sitting on our front porch. His suitcase and his mother's. Emma had been incredibly helpful and surprisingly thorough for a 17-year-old. We'd packed David's clothes, toiletries, and personal items with the efficiency of a military operation. Rose's things had taken longer. The woman had apparently planned to stay for months based on the amount of stuff she'd brought. This is so satisfying, Emma had said as we folded Rose's clothes into her suitcase. I've been wanting someone to stand up to her for years. She's always been horrible to you. And everyone just pretended not to see it. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. When David finally knocked on the door instead of using his key, I opened it to find him standing next to the luggage like a man who'd finally understood the gravity of his situation. Quinn, he said, and I could see he'd been crying. Please, we need to talk. No, we don't, I replied from the doorway, not inviting him in. Quinn, what you did today was unforgivable. I looked up at him, this man who'd just spent the last 8 hours with his mother instead of coming home to comfort his wife, and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. What I did? David, your mother tried to push me down the stairs. She wasn't trying to kill you. She was trying to, I don't know, test you or something. It was stupid and dangerous, but it wasn't attempted murder. Test me. Like I was some kind of laboratory animal being put through an experiment to determine my fitness as a wife. And that makes it better? It makes it different than what you're claiming. You could have handled this privately. You could have shown me the videos. Let me deal with my mother quietly. Instead, you chose to humiliate her in front of my entire family. Your mother humiliated herself, David. I just provided the evidence. You orchestrated a public destruction of a 65-year-old woman. A 65-year-old woman. Not my mother, or the person who tried to hurt my wife, just a generic elderly victim of my supposed cruelty. Where is she now? I asked. Staying at a hotel, crying, devastated that her son's wife set her up like that. Set her up. As if I'd forced Rose to spend a week booby-trapping our house and then push me down the stairs. She's devastated, David? What about me? What about your wife who was just assaulted by your mother? You're not hurt. The words hit me like a physical blow. You're not hurt. As if my broken arm was imaginary. As if the week of psychological torture was nothing. As if the systematic attempt to drive me insane was just par for the course. I have a broken arm. From an accident that happened because you were carrying too much down the stairs. Mom barely touched you. Barely touched me. We'd both watched the same video, but somehow David had managed to reinterpret what he'd seen to minimize his mother's culpability. David, she pushed me. She guided you. You were off balance anyway. If you hadn't been carrying so much, if you'd been more careful, if you'd been paying attention, if every sentence designed to shift blame away from Rose and onto me. So this is my fault? This is everyone's fault. Mom shouldn't have tested you the way she did. But you shouldn't have been so secretive, so manipulative. You shouldn't have recorded her without permission. You shouldn't have ambushed her like that. Secretive. Manipulative. The same words Rose had used to describe me, now coming out of my husband's mouth. I was protecting myself. You were plotting revenge. I was gathering evidence of abuse. You were setting up my mother for public humiliation. We went in circles like that for 2 hours. Every fact I presented, David had an excuse for. Every piece of evidence I cited, he found a way to reinterpret. His mother wasn't evil. She was misguided. She wasn't dangerous. She was desperate. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to help David see the truth about his marriage. And what truth was that? Exactly? That I was unstable. That I was manipulative. That I was exactly the kind of woman who would secretly record her mother-in-law and then ambush her with the evidence in front of the whole family. You want to know what I think? David said finally, when it became clear that neither of us was going to back down. Not particularly, but I'm sure you're going to tell me anyway. I think my mother was right about you. I think you are manipulative. I think you did orchestrate this whole situation to get rid of her. I think you're exactly the kind of woman who would use a few days of harmless pranks to destroy a family. Harmless pranks. That's what we were calling attempted murder now. Go away, I said. Quinn, go away, David. Take your suitcase and don't come back. This is my house too. Not anymore. He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him calculating. Wondering if I was serious? Wondering if he could wait me out? If I'd eventually back down and apologize like I always did? I want a divorce, I said, just to clarify things for him. You don't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life. Quinn, you're upset. You're hurt. But we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can figure out a way for you and Mom to coexist peacefully. Coexist peacefully. With the woman who'd just tried to murder me. Your mother will never accept me, David. And you will never choose me over her. So we're done. I chose you. I married you. You married me, but you never chose me. Not once in 3 years have you ever taken my side over hers. Not once have you ever defended me when she attacked me. Not even when she tried to kill me. She didn't try to kill you. Go away. Quinn, go away! I screamed it loud enough that the neighbors probably heard, but I didn't care. I was done being reasonable. Done being understanding. Done being the patient wife who accepted whatever scraps of loyalty David felt like throwing my way. David picked up his suitcase, but not before delivering one final piece of wisdom from the Rose Hartwell School of Emotional Manipulation. You're going to regret this, Quinn. You're going to realize that you destroyed a good marriage over a few harmless pranks. And when you do, don't expect me to take you back. A few harmless pranks. Right. I closed the door and watched through the window as he loaded both suitcases into his car and drove away. The next morning, I called a lawyer. The morning after that, David received divorce papers. He called 17 times that day. I didn't answer once, because I'd finally learned the most important lesson Rose had spent 3 years trying to teach me. Some people will never see you as worthy of love and respect, no matter what you do. And when those people happen to be your husband and his mother, your only choice is to walk away. So I did. 3 months later, David was singing a different tune. Quinn, please, we can work this out. We don't need lawyers. We don't need to make this ugly. We were sitting in my attorney's conference room, where David had been forced to confront the reality of what a divorce was actually going to cost him. Turns out, when your wife has video evidence of your mother attempting assault, and when you spent 3 years financially intertwining your lives, the settlement negotiations don't exactly go in your favor. It's already ugly, David, I replied, not looking up from the papers my lawyer had spread across the table. It became ugly when your mother tried to push me down the stairs and you defended her for it. She's been seeing a therapist, he said desperately. She's working on her issues. She realizes she went too far. Too far. Not she realizes she committed assault, or she realizes she tried to seriously injure you. Just too far, like she'd been slightly rude at a dinner party. How nice for her, I said. I hope therapy helps her work through her homicidal tendencies. Quinn, Mr. Hartwell, my attorney interrupted. We're here to discuss the division of assets, not to relitigate your client's family dynamics. Shall we continue? The assets in question were substantial. More substantial than David had apparently realized when he'd stormed out of our house 3 months earlier. The house itself, which I'd helped purchase and decorate, the cars, including the one I drove daily, our joint savings account, which contained money I'd contributed equally, David's 401k, which had grown substantially during our marriage thanks to my income allowing him to maximize his contributions. On paper, it looked like a pretty straightforward 50-50 split, except for the Rose factor. Mrs. Hartwell, my lawyer said, would you like to explain your position regarding the assault charges? David went white. Assault charges? Your mother committed assault and battery, Mr. Hartwell. My lawyer explained patiently. We have video evidence. We have medical records documenting Mrs. Hartwell's injuries. We have multiple witnesses to your mother's confession. The district attorney is very interested in the case. You're pressing charges? David asked, turning to stare at me. I'm considering it, I replied. My lawyer thinks we have an excellent case. Apparently, setting traps to injure someone and then physically pushing them downstairs qualifies as criminal behavior. Who knew? Quinn, you can't. She's an old woman. She made a mistake. She's already suffered enough. She's suffered enough. The woman who terrorized me for a week and then tried to seriously injure me had suffered enough because her plan had been exposed. Here's what I'm thinking, I said, finally looking directly at David. I'm willing to not press charges against your mother. I'm even willing to accept less than I'm entitled to in this divorce. But I have conditions. What conditions? I keep the house. I keep my car. I keep the savings account. You can have your 401k and whatever else you want, but those 3 things are non-negotiable. That's not fair. That's more than half of everything. Fair? I laughed, and even I was surprised by how bitter it sounded. David, your mother spent a week trying to drive me insane and then pushed me down a flight of stairs. You not only defended her, you blame me for recording the evidence. And you think fair is giving you half of everything? The house is worth $300,000. Then you'd better hope your mother's freedom is worth more than that to you. We stared at each other across the conference table, and I could see David doing the math. The house, my car, and our savings account versus the cost of defending Rose against assault charges, the potential publicity, the impact on his career, the impact on Rose's life. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a choice, the same choice you offered me for 3 years. Accept what Rose dishes out, or face the consequences. This is revenge. This is justice. David's lawyer leaned over to whisper something in his ear, probably explaining exactly how criminal trials work, how expensive they are, and how likely it was that Rose would end up with a criminal record at age 65. Fine, David said finally. But I want visitation rights. Visitation rights? To the house. It was my home too. I should be able to— David? My lawyer interrupted. You don't get visitation rights to a house. Then I want some of her personal property. Things that belong to my family. Wedding gifts from my relatives. Wedding gifts from your relatives to both of us, I corrected. But sure, you can have the crystal vases from your Aunt Patricia. Consider them a consolation prize. The negotiation continued for another hour, but the outcome was never really in doubt. David could either accept my terms or watch his mother face criminal charges for assault. He chose his mother, just like he always had. The papers were signed on a Friday afternoon in October. David got his 401k, his car, and a box of wedding presents from his family. I got the house, my car, my freedom, and the satisfaction of knowing that Rose would spend the rest of her life knowing that her precious son had sacrificed his marriage to protect her from the consequences of her own actions. As I drove home from the lawyer's office, I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years ago when I married David. That woman had been so desperate to be accepted by his family that she'd allowed herself to be slowly destroyed by Rose's psychological warfare. She'd believed that love meant accepting whatever treatment people chose to give you. The woman driving home that day knew better. Love doesn't mean accepting abuse. Marriage doesn't mean sacrificing your safety for someone else's comfort. And family doesn't mean enabling dangerous behavior just because it's coming from someone you're related to. 6 months later, I heard through mutual friends that David was living in his mother's basement, helping her pay the legal fees she'd racked up defending herself against the neighbors who'd heard about her little stair-pushing incident. Apparently, Rose had become something of a pariah in her community once word got out about what she'd done. Some people suggested I should feel sorry for them. I didn't. I felt free. Rose had spent 3 years trying to teach me that I wasn't good enough for her son. In the end, she'd taught me something much more valuable, that I was too good for both of them. And that was a lesson worth every broken bone, every sleepless night, and every dollar I'd spent on lawyers to make sure justice was served. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just refusing to be a victim anymore. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt trapped in a toxic family situation or questioned your own sanity because of someone else's manipulation, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about finding your strength when the people who should protect you become the ones you need protection from.